On the edge of a quiet street in Springfield, Ohio, stood a once lived-in house, now broken by silence. Paint peeled from its siding, a rusted tricycle they'd forgotten in the weeds, and a crooked porch sagged under years of neglect. Inside the shadows crouched Rex, a German shepherd of pure strength, now reduced to skin and bones. His fur, once golden and thick, clung patchy to his frame, ribs pressing against the skin. He lifted his head at every sound, ears twitching, heart desperate for footsteps that never came. The air smelled of mold, rot, and loneliness. His bowl sat overturned, the last trace of water long evaporated. The king of this house was gone, leaving his dog behind. But Rex didn't know abandonment, only loyalty. And so he waited, his brown eyes fixed on the door that had been slammed shut forever. The days stretched long, bleeding into nights, and hunger became his cruel companion. His once mighty jaw now trembled as he nudged the rusted bowl across the floor, scraping echoes through the house like a plea unanswered. Outside, autumn winds carried the smell of roasted dinners from neighboring homes, taunting his empty stomach. His tail, which once wagged at the sound of keys in the lock, lay limp against the cold floorboards. He dreamed of soft hands and warm voices, but woke to silence. His heart beat slower, his breath shallower, yet still he waited. For in his world, love was eternal, even when abandoned. Every faint creak at the porch stirred hope, hope that a familiar face would return. But no one came. And with each passing day, the emptiness of the bowl seemed to mirror the emptiness of his world.
As the November nights grew harsher, Rex's voice began to fade into weak whimpers. Once he had barked with strength, calling for his human. Now his cries were soft, broken sounds that barely escaped his throat. They slipped through the cracks of the wooden door, out into the empty street, dissolving in the cold Ohio air. The wind howled like a cruel chorus, drowning his suffering and indifference. His paws scratched at the door until nails splintered, leaving streaks of pain behind. And still, silence answered. In the dark, Rex curled into himself, bones pressing against bones, each breath a fragile battle against the night. His eyes searched the shadows for a figure that would never appear. Alone, forgotten, his world shrank to hunger, cold, and the fading rhythm of his own heartbeat. In the emptiness, flashes of memory haunted Rex. Once a pair of hands had scratched behind his ears, hands that smelled of soap and earth. He remembered chasing after a young woman's footsteps, Karen Whitfield, his owner, her laughter bright, her voice warm. But that warmth was now a ghost. The last memory he held was a slammed door, Karen walking away without looking back. He had waited that first day with wagging tail, then the second day with whimpers, then the third day with silence. In his mind, loyalty meant forever. In hers, perhaps, it was a burden too heavy to carry. And so the sound of that door closing replayed over and over, as if the house itself mocked him. Rex pressed his muzzle to the crack of the door, where her scent had once lingered, and found nothing.
Across the street, lights flickered on in warm kitchens, while Rex dragged his frail body onto the crooked porch, hoping the night air might bring relief. His amber eyes caught passing figures, neighbors hurrying home, cars rumbling by, but no one stopped. Among them was Nancy Miller, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes dulled by fatigue. She noticed the gaunt dog crouched beneath the porch railings, his fur tangled, his breath shallow. But she looked away, her chest tightening. She told herself someone else would step in, that surely the owner would return. And yet the sight of Rex's trembling body stayed in her mind long after she closed her curtains. That night, as she sipped tea, guilt stirred inside her. Rex, however, curled tighter, his whimpers swallowed by the November wind, shadows his only company. Frost spread its silver fingers across Springfield's yards, while Rex pressed himself against the broken porch steps, trying to shield his shivering body. His breath came in faint white clouds, dissolving into the frozen night. Each gust of wind carried with it a bite sharper than hunger, cutting through his patchy coat. His paws, once strong, now cracked and bleeding against the splintered wood. The world smelled of smoke and fallen leaves, yet for him there was no fire, no warmth, only the bitter taste of neglect. Neighbors hurried past in scarves and gloves, their laughter muffled by the chill. They didn't look under the porch. They didn't hear the faint whimper that broke the silence. But the night remembered, the cold remembered, and Rex endured, loyal still to a home that had long abandoned him.
From her kitchen window, Nancy Miller once again saw the outline of Rex curled beneath the porch. His ribs rose and fell with visible effort, each breath shallow. The light from her stove lamp reflected in his amber eyes too tired to bark anymore. Nancy gripped her mug tightly, her conscience gnawing. She whispered to herself, "He belongs to someone. It's not my place." Yet deep down, she knew the truth. No one was coming back for him. His silence screamed louder than any bark could. The longer she watched, the more her guilt grew, until it filled the room around her. But still, fear of getting involved won. Nancy turned away from the window, leaving Rex to the shadows. But as she lay in bed later, those eyes haunted her, silent pleas that pierced through the glass and into her soul. Daylight revealed the cruelty of indifference. Delivery trucks rattled past, students hurried to buses, joggers pounded the sidewalk, all passing the crumbling house where Rex lay. Some glanced, some didn't, but no one stopped. His fur, matted and dirty, bristled weakly when strangers neared, though his strength barely allowed him to lift his head. The smell of wet asphalt and exhaust mixed with the faint stench of decay from the neglected yard. Time blurred. The world moved forward, but Rex's world shrank smaller, locked to that porch, that door, that faint hope. And yet his amber eyes still flickered with loyalty, searching for the figure that had left him. A question echoed unspoken to everyone who passed. How many saw, and how many chose silence? The street walked on, but the misery it carried remained unmoved.
By the 10th day of solitude, Rex's voice had vanished. His throat, once strong, was raw and dry, unable to form even a whimper. His belly caved in, legs trembling from weakness. The porch, his prison, had become both shelter and coffin. Above him, November skies wept gray rain, each droplet soaking through his thinning coat, chilling him to the bone. Yet even as his strength drained, his eyes still searched. Loyalty, unbreakable, clung to him like a chain heavier than any collar. He waited, because waiting was all he knew. In his silence lay the weight of every abandoned creature, the heartbreak of devotion unanswered. And though neighbors had noticed, though eyes had lingered, still no hands reached for him. For Rex, hope was slipping away, fading into the misty Ohio air, where even prayers seemed too quiet to rise. That evening, as street lamps flickered on and the air grew thick with frost, a single sound broke the quiet. Rex, with what little strength he had left, released one faint, desperate cry. It was not a bark, not even a whine, just a broken whisper of life pleading not to be forgotten. Inside her home, Nancy Miller froze mid-step. Her chest tightened, her throat closed. She could no longer pretend. That cry pierced through her excuses, louder than any alarm. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "He's still holding on." Her guilt transformed into something stronger, a decision. For the first time, she reached for the phone with trembling fingers. On the other end, a calm, steady voice answered, Josh Carter, the local rescuer, already preparing to drive through the night. For Rex, hope had finally found its way.
The gravel crunched under the tires of an old Ford pickup as Josh Carter pulled up to the crumbling Springfield house. At 32, Josh was no stranger to despair. His work as an animal rescuer had carved sorrow into his features, but also a quiet determination. His broad shoulders carried years of lifting cages. His hands bore scars from battles with chains and neglect. Tonight, his heart raced as he stepped from the truck, flashlight in hand. The porch sagged under his boots, and the air carried the faint, desperate scent of a starving dog. He whispered into the shadows, "Easy now, I'm here." His voice was steady, low, and kind. From beneath the porch, a pair of dim amber eyes flickered back. Eyes that still waited, still believed. Josh knelt, letting the cold dampness soak into his jeans, and waited for Rex to decide. Josh lowered himself further, resting one scarred hand on the porch floorboards. His flashlight beam softened, revealing Rex's frail frame. The dog's ribs heaved with each labored breath, fur tangled with dirt and rain. Yet those amber eyes locked onto Josh's, searching, measuring. A growl rose, faint but instinctive, as Rex tried to summon the strength of a guardian he no longer had. Josh didn't flinch. He whispered again, his breath steaming in the frosty air. "Easy, boy. You're safe." He slid a shallow dish of water closer, the ripples shimmering under the beam. Rex hesitated, nostrils quivering, before inching forward. His tongue, cracked and dry, touched the water with desperate need. For the first time in weeks, relief met his body. Josh's chest tightened. This wasn't just survival. This was trust beginning to flicker in the darkness.
Minutes stretched like hours as Rex slowly edged toward the dish. Josh remained still, his knees aching on the cold wood, his breath steady. Finally, when the last drop of water was gone, Rex lifted his weary head. His body trembled, but his eyes didn't leave Josh's. Then came the moment. Cautious, fragile, powerful. Josh extended his hand, palm open, scarred but gentle. Rex flinched at first, ears twitching back, heart racing. But instead of pulling away, Josh waited, still as stone. A pause hung between them, as if time itself held its breath. Then, Rex leaned forward and pressed his cold, damp nose into Josh's palm. The silence of the porch broke, not with sound, but with connection. A silent vow between man and dog that neither abandonment nor suffering could erase. With Rex's nose against his palm, Josh whispered, "Good boy, you're safe now." Slowly, carefully, he reached for the rope tangled around Rex's neck, a filthy, frayed tether that had cut into his fur. Rex tensed, trembling, his body torn between memory and instinct. But Josh's steady tone, his gentle patience, worked like balm. One hand freed the nut, while the other never left Rex's muzzle. The rope fell loose, thudding softly to the porch. Rex blinked, as though realizing for the first time that the weight around his neck was gone. Josh rubbed the tender skin, fury flashing briefly in his eyes, not at Rex, but at the cruelty that had left him this way. Yet he spoke only kindness. "Never again, buddy. Never again." And for the first time, Rex's tail gave a faint, trembling wag.
Josh wrapped a thick wool blanket around Rex, careful not to startle him. The German shepherd leaned weakly against his chest, bones sharp beneath his coat, body trembling from cold and fear. Josh carried him step by step down the creaking porch stairs and across the frozen yard. The Ford truck's door opened with a groan, and warmth from the heater spilled into the night air. Rex lifted his head faintly, catching the scent of leather seats, the faint smell of hay, and Josh's reassuring cologne. As Josh laid him gently onto the blanket in the back seat, Rex exhaled a shaky breath, his eyes half closing. For weeks, he had known only cold boards and emptiness. Now, cradled in the warmth of a stranger's care, he felt something long forgotten: safety. Outside, the night wind howled, but inside the truck, hope had begun. The Ford's headlights cut through the misty Ohio backroads until finally a glowing red cross appeared, the Springfield Veterinary Clinic. Its fluorescent lights buzzed against the silence of the night, a beacon in the darkness. Josh parked, shutting off the engine, and turned to the back seat. Rex stirred weakly, his breath shallow, eyes half-lidded. "Almost there, buddy," Josh whispered, brushing his fingers across Rex's head. As the doors opened, the warmth of the clinic spilled out, carrying the sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with faint traces of hay and fur. For Rex, it was overwhelming. Strange smells, bright lights, unfamiliar echoes. His ears twitched nervously, but exhaustion won over fear. Wrapped in the wool blanket, Rex was carried inside, not as a stray abandoned in the cold, but as a soul finally recognized, finally seen. The fight for his life was about to begin.
Inside, the night shift vet awaited. Dr. Rebecca Harper, late 30s, with steady hazel eyes and hands trained by years of compassion. She wore a navy scrub top under a white coat, her stethoscope hanging loose around her neck. The moment Rex was set on the exam table, Rebecca's brows furrowed. His ribs showed sharp, his paws cracked, his coat thinned by neglect. Yet his amber eyes met hers, and she softened. She pressed the stethoscope gently to his chest. The sound that returned was faint, fragile, but still there. "He's a fighter," she murmured. Josh nodded, watching like a guardian who refused to look away. Rebecca's gloved hand stroked Rex's muzzle, and when his tongue flicked weakly against her wrist, she smiled. In that moment, healer and patient met, not in science alone, but in shared recognition of survival against cruelty. Machines hummed as Rebecca inserted an IV line, her hands practiced, efficient, yet gentle. Fluids began dripping into Rex's frail body, each drop a quiet promise. His ears twitched, and for a moment, his breathing steadied. Josh stood close, whispering encouragement. "Stay with me, boy. You've come too far." The clinic lights reflected off Rex's eyes as they blinked open and shut, fighting against the heavy pull of sleep. The sterile air was thick with tension. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Rebecca glanced at the monitor, her jaw tight, then at Josh. "It's going to be a long night," she said softly. Yet in Rex's chest, faint but undeniable, there was still rhythm, still fight. The line between life and silence was razor thin, but tonight Rex refused to cross it. Hours passed. Josh sat in a hard plastic chair, elbows on his knees, eyes never leaving Rex's form beneath the heat lamp. His mind drifted to all the rescues he had seen, but this one cut deeper. Maybe it was the loyalty still visible in Rex's eyes, or the way his tail had tried to wag despite starvation. In the background, Rebecca scribbled notes, her face pale with exhaustion, yet every so often she looked at Rex with quiet determination. The room smelled of antiseptic, punctuated by the soft beep of machines. Josh whispered prayers into the silence, not the loud kind, but the kind born of desperation. Every twitch, every breath Rex made became a victory. The weight of waiting pressed heavy, but beneath it lived something stubborn, unyielding, hope, fragile but alive. Just before dawn, when the clinic windows turned from black to gray, Rex stirred. His chest rose with a steadier rhythm. His nose twitched at the smell of fresh bandages and antiseptic. Rebecca leaned closer, her eyes softening. "He's responding," she said, almost in disbelief. Josh's shoulders sagged with relief, a tear slipping unnoticed down his cheek. Rex blinked slowly, his amber eyes finding Josh, then Rebecca. The faintest of sighs left his chest, not of pain, but of surrender. Not to death, but to care. Josh reached through the bars of the kennel, fingers brushing Rex's paw. This time, Rex didn't flinch. Instead,
His paw, weak but deliberate, pressed back. It wasn't recovery yet, not even close, but it was a flicker, a fragile light against weeks of darkness, a promise of tomorrow.
Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, cutting golden stripes across the clinic floor. Rex lay under the warmth of the heat lamp, his ribs still sharp, but his eyes less hollow. When Rebecca opened his kennel, he lifted his head. The IV still hung beside him, but his ears perked faintly. Josh knelt, sliding his hand forward, palm open as always. Rex sniffed, then pressed his nose into it again, stronger this time. Rebecca whispered, "He's got fight in him." Josh nodded, smiling through tired eyes. Carefully, Rex shifted, planting one paw, then another, before collapsing into Josh's lap. It wasn't much, but after weeks of silence, it was a first step. In that fragile movement, everyone in the room felt it. Rex wasn't just surviving, he was choosing to live. Rebecca set down a small bowl of softened food, her hands steady, though her eyes carried worry. Rex sniffed at it, uncertain. For so long, food had meant scraps tossed carelessly, or meals never coming at all. Josh crouched beside him, voice low and steady. "Go on, buddy, this is yours." Slowly, Rex leaned down, tongue brushing the food. Then, with a sudden hunger awakened, he ate, trembling with urgency. Each bite was a small victory, each swallow a defiance of neglect. Rebecca smiled faintly, jotting notes, but her eyes softened. This was more than nutrition, it was healing. Josh stroked Rex's back, murmuring reassurances if the dog could understand every word. In that room, the sound of chewing wasn't just ordinary. It was the sound of silence breaking, of a dog reclaiming life, bite by fragile bite. Days later, the clinic's front bell chimed, and in stepped Nancy Miller. Mid-40s, with kind but tired eyes, she twisted her scarf nervously as she asked for Josh. When she saw Rex in the kennel, her breath caught. "I heard him for weeks," she admitted softly, her voice shaking. "I thought someone else would help." Shame painted her face, her hands wringing. Josh studied her, silent for a long moment, before saying, "At least you came forward now." Nancy's eyes filled with tears as she stepped closer to Rex, who lifted his head weakly at her presence. She whispered, "I'm sorry, boy." The words trembled into the sterile air, carried more for her soul than his. The clinic felt heavier, yet strangely lighter too. A burden confessed, even if too late. Nancy's guilt hung in the air like fog, but Rex, true to his nature, gave no judgment. When she reached her trembling fingers toward the bars, Rex sniffed her hand, then pressed his nose softly against it. Her breath broke into a sob. Josh watched silently, his jaw tight, but he did not intervene. Rebecca observed too, her expression one of quiet understanding. Forgiveness wasn't something humans always earned, but animals, they often gave it freely. Nancy whispered, "I don't deserve this." Yet Rex's amber eyes, calm and steady, offered only acceptance. For the first time in weeks, Nancy's heart loosened from its guilt. The clinic wasn't just healing Rex. In some way, it was healing her too. And in that moment, forgiveness was not a word, but a living act embodied in the touch of a once broken dog. The next morning, Josh sat by Rex's kennel, coffee cooling in his hands. "You know," he said softly, "we should call you by your name again. You deserve that much." He glanced at Rebecca, who nodded. Looking at Rex, he whispered, "Rex, that's you. Strong, brave Rex." At the sound, Rex's ears perked. His tail gave a slow, weak wag. Josh grinned through the fatigue. "That's right. You remember, don't you?" The name, once a sound tied to neglect and fear, was now reborn in warmth, spoken with care. Rebecca smiled, brushing her hair back. "He knows," she said. Nancy, standing quietly at the doorway, felt tears sting her eyes. A dog who had been discarded was reclaiming more than food or health. He was reclaiming identity. He was Rex again, not forgotten, not abandoned, but loved. 2 weeks later, Rebecca opened the clinic's back door, letting the autumn sun spill across the concrete. Josh clipped a leash gently to Rex's collar.
For the first time since his rescue, Rex took steps outside. His legs shook, his frame still lean, but his paws touched grass. He paused, nose twitching at the smell of earth, of fresh air. Josh crouched low, whispering, "Go on, Rex. This is yours now." Slowly, Rex moved forward, one step, then another, until sunlight bathed his fur. His tail swayed faintly, a shadow of the wag it once was. Nancy, standing near the fence, wiped tears silently. That moment wasn't just walking, it was resurrection. The dog who had once laid in filth was walking under heaven's light. The hooks of misery paid off here, suffering giving way to fragile, beautiful life.
At the shelter's small garden, Rebecca knelt beside Rex, offering her hand again. His muzzle pressed against her palm, warm and steady now. She checked his heartbeat, then smiled faintly at Josh. "He's stronger, much stronger." Josh chuckled, rubbing Rex's neck. "Told you he had fight in him." Rex licked Josh's wrist, then leaned his head into Rebecca's chest, eyes closing in trust. Nancy knelt too, hesitant, but Rex turned and let his paw rest against her hand. She broke again into tears, whispering thanks no one else could hear. In that circle, rescuer, healer, neighbor, Rex had found what he had been denied: gentle hands, safety, belonging. Every touch healed scars, not just on him, but on them too. He had been abandoned by one, but reclaimed by many. And love had the final word. Yet, even as Rex grew stronger, reminders of his past lingered. His ribs, though filling out, still bore faint outlines. His coat, though brushed and groomed, carried scars where fur never grew back. At night, he startled at sudden noises, ears flattening, tail tucked. Josh noticed it all, his heart heavy. "Some wounds don't vanish," Rebecca told him softly, watching from the exam room doorway. "But they teach us something, don't they?" Josh nodded, brushing his hand along Rex's back. "They teach us to keep going." The scars were not signs of weakness, but survival. For the audience, this was a rehook, a reminder that cruelty leaves marks, but resilience outlives pain. Rex was not just recovering, he was living proof that even brokenness could walk, breathe, and love again. His shadowed past only deepened his light.
Weeks later, Rex trotted more confidently, tail swaying freely. His coat gleamed under the sun as Josh led him into a modest backyard, Josh's own. A wooden fence wrapped the yard, leaves crunching underfoot, a porch swing creaking gently. "This is home now, buddy," Josh said, kneeling low. Rex sniffed the air, then bounded clumsily across the grass, chasing nothing but joy. Nancy visited with treats, Rebecca stopped by with checkups, and the circle of care never broke. For the first time, Rex had not just food and shelter, but a family stitched together by compassion. He curled by Josh's rocking chair as evening fell, eyes closing in peace. It wasn't just a new chapter, it was a new book entirely. From neglect to love, from filth to forever, Rex had come home. The screen faded into Rex lying under the porch light, chest rising steady, his amber eyes half closed in safety. Josh's voice narrated softly. He was left to die, but he chose to live. And in saving him, I think he saved us too. Rebecca's words echoed. Some wounds don't vanish, but love makes them bearable. Nancy stood at the fence, whispering goodbye for the night, her face lighter than when she first appeared. Rex lifted his head, tail thumping softly against the wood. This wasn't the story of a dog broken by cruelty. It was the story of resilience, forgiveness, and grace that only animals can show so purely. As the music swelled, the final hook paid off. Misery transformed into hope. Rex wasn't just a survivor. He was a legacy, living proof that love always wins.